Hello viewers, welcome to the session. Language plays a vital role in our life. Really, we identify ourselves with language. We cannot imagine even a moment without language. We use different languages and different dialects for communication. And some people say that even birds and animals also have language. Today, the question is, what is language? Do animals and birds have language? And what do we do with language? So, what is language? Language is a means of communication. Communication is transfer of information. And we exchange our thoughts, our feelings, ideas, or opinions with others using language. And language is a code. There must be a sender and a receiver. And language is presented in oral as well as written mode. And language is both natural or man-made. A computer language is an example of man-made language. But here, as far as our session is concerned, we are limited to natural or human language. And language is verbal as well as non-verbal. What do we mean by non-verbal language? A good example is a sigh or a cry or a shriek and our voice modulation. It is part of our communication. So, how can we define a human language, and how is human language different from that of animals and birds? Animals also have language, birds also have language, but do we really call them languages? A defined language has certain features. Let us see them. And animals have a communication system which is in restricted mode. What do animals do? They generate a set of sounds and even they go for modulation. It does not mean that they have language. You can say the ducks only quack and the cats mew. But they can't produce other sounds, they can't use other languages. And in non-linguistic communication, we use gestures, sighs, and short cries, etc. And even our body language also conveys some message. But here at this point, what do we mean by human language and what are the characteristics of human language? Here they are. These are the features of human language. Duality of structure, creativity and productivity, interchangeability, cultural transmission, displacement, specialization, arbitrariness, redundancy, discreteness, and reflexiveness. When we are talking about a defined human language, it has to have all these features. Now, let us see them in detail. Duality of structure means there is two levels of patterning in human language. Meaningless units, which are phonemes, form arbitrary signs, words, and the signs form larger meaningful units which are sentences. So, the structure is observed at two levels. Number one, smaller units like phonemes, they constitute larger units, words, and words constitute sentences. And even you can go further. Phonemes or letters, they make words, and words make phrases, and phrases make sentences, and sentences make texts. So, this is duality of structure which is only with human language. Neither the languages of animals nor the languages of birds have this feature. And this is one example. We have discrete items S, P, O, T. With this, we can go for combinations like spot, stop, pots, and opts. Similarly, we have words the earth is round. With this, we can make a larger one which is a sentence, the earth is round, as well as is the earth round. The second one is creativity and productivity. We cannot count the number of utterances in any language. We cannot say how many words are there or how many sentences are there in a language. It is impossible because language is quite creative. And human language is very open-ended, and we can say things that have never said before, including lies and imaginary expressions. And it is the ability to produce new sentences that are instant and understood by the others. And similarly, we can extend a sentence. So, creativity refers to the ability to produce n number of sentences, and productivity, you can extend a sentence to the maximum extent. You can further elongate. So, we know very well about adding lines. This is the house that Jack built. This is the room in the house that Jack built. In this way, we can further extend a sentence. The other one is interchangeability. It means all members and all human beings here in this context, both male or female, can use the same language. There is no difference in the language used by men or women. We use the same language. But in case of animals and birds, bee dance, it is done only by foragers, and bird song is performed only by male birds. But as far as human language is concerned, language is interchangeable. And other one is cultural transmission. Frankly speaking, our culture is reflected by our language, and it is a convention. The way we use language, the variety of language we practice, it is culturally influenced, and language is transformed from generation to generation, and it is flexible. If we see old movies, you can see the language which was used in old movies is different from the language that we use today. And language always includes new utterances or new expressions. If we go back to a decade, we don't know much about WhatsApp or share chart, but now everyone knows. And if you go back further, we were not at all aware of upload or download or even a computer or a mail. And language is culturally transmitted and it is interrelated. And every time when language is manifested in texts like classics or even poems or even novels, they reflect the culture of the particular period. So, language is culturally transmitted. Displacement. It means human beings can refer to distant in space and time. We can talk about past, present and even future. And we can talk about London while we are in Hyderabad. So this is displacement. And we can talk about our experiences, we can talk about imagination also. So language is always context free, whereas animal communication is context bound. We can observe our pet dog, the way it makes sounds when it is angry, or the way when it makes sounds when it is hungry. It is always context bound, whereas human language is context free. The other feature is specialization. We can communicate while engaged in other activities. We can do more than one activity at the same time. While working in the kitchen, you can listen to the music. There need not be a total physical involvement in the act of communication. So we know sometimes while playing cricket, the player keeps on talking while doing fielding. This is also an example for specialization. And next one is arbitrariness. There is no inherent connection between a written word and its reference. The relationship between words and their meanings is totally arbitrary. For example, if I show you a pen and if I ask you the question, what is a pen? Everyone responds in the same way, it is a pen. But if I ask you, why is it a pen? You cannot say. Because language is arbitrary. Sometimes one word may refer to more than one. For example, you can say mouse. Mouse can be an animal, at the same time mouse can be the computer peripheral. So language is arbitrary. And the other one is redundancy, which means two linguistic markers are used for one expression. If I say a question, is he coming? It is a question or an expression. It is marked by two issues. One is the fronting of the verb. You can see, is he coming? Here the verb is comes first and it ends with a question mark. So the fronting of the verb and the question mark, they both refer to one expression. In oral mode, the fronting of the verb and the rising tone, since it is a polarity question or yes no type question, we use the rising tone. You can say, is he coming? So the verb is in the beginning as well as the rising tone. So in oral communication, if somebody says he is coming, it is also understood as a question. But grammatically it will not stand. So is he coming is a good one, both in oral mode as well as in written mode. And it has two features, the fronting of the verb as well as the question mark or the rising tone. It is the feature called redundancy. And the next one is discreteness. So human languages are made of small units that constitute larger units. So human languages have phonemes, syllables, morphemes, words, sentences, etc. These units are isolate as well as repeatable. So pa, a and t. The same elements are found in words pat, apt and tap. Similarly, the letters a, t, c, they are found in words like cat and act. So this is discreteness. And last one is reflexiveness. It is the ability to use the communication system to discuss the system itself. We are all much aware of grammar books. So what do grammar books do? grammar books give us the explicit information of language, and there we use language to describe or to talk about language itself, which is called meta language. So, dear viewers, so far we have come across the different features of human language. No animal language or bird language has these features. So, all these features are applicable to a defined human language. And the next question is, what do we do with language? And what is the function of language? Primarily speaking, the purpose of language is to communicate. So, language is used to communicate information and to direct the actions of others, to perform actions. So, sometimes we use language and you perform the same. Okay, I am placing your pen on the table. At the same time, we place the pen on the table. I am getting you some tea. We go into the kitchen and come out with a cup of tea. So, performative actions. And to find about the world and to organize thoughts and to explain language, which is called meta language or reflexiveness, we have just discussed. So, these are the functions and use of language. And competence and performance. When we come to language, these two words are very important: competence and performance. What do we mean by competence or linguistic competence? Competence refers to the ability of knowledge. If I have competence in language, means I am aware of the language, I am aware of its system, I am aware of the system of pronunciation, I am aware of the system of syntax, I am aware of its morphology, I am aware of its semantics and pragmatics. I know all about that. On the other side of the coin, performance means the ability to use language in context. So, what we know is competence. The knowledge of grammar and other rules refers to competence, whereas performance means how we use the language in actual contexts. What are the factors that affect language learning? The first thing is, language is human phenomenon. Our speech organs contribute to the production of language. So, if there is any disorders, our language production may not be so good. It could be cognitive development and the growth of speech organs. Sometimes people, they stammer. It's a disability which is related to physical factors, and the other one is social factors, status in the society and family is also. And very important in language teaching is psychological factors. You must have seen in the classroom that only few children come out to communicate. Most of the children, generally they don't come out. What is the reason? They might have been scared of language use. They might fear that the teacher may scold them if they do something wrong. So, fear is one of the psychological factors, and sometimes some children show much more interest in language games or in speeches. So, they show interest and there are some inhibitions. They know something, but they may not come out because of fear. Oh, I think this is correct, but I don't know whether teacher agrees to me or not. These are the inhibitions, and sometimes risk. Some people believe, okay, why should I take the risk? If there is anything wrong, I will be blamed. Why should I do that? So, these are all psychological factors which always remain as barriers in language learning. So, in the classroom, we should try ourselves best to minimize these psychological factors that are negative. We should encourage our children to come out with language at their disposal. If somebody says, I know a language, What do you know about a language? I can communicate in a language. So, if you speak in terms of linguistics, if somebody says knowing a language means the person should know about the sound patterns, phonetics and phonology, how the sounds of the language are constituted, and how larger units are made, and how voice modulation takes place, and word patterns, how words are made, the root, the stem, affixation, compounding and all. And sometimes we can make some comparison. The suffixes and prefixes are different in languages, and sometimes they will be totally changed. And if I know language means I know the system of sentences which is called syntax. Syntax tells us about the organization of smaller units in utterances. We all know that in a common English sentence, generally it begins with the subject and verb is in the second position. So, English is considered as V2 language. But if we take Telugu or Indian languages, they are V3 languages. Means generally in a normal Telugu utterance, the verb is in the third position. So, it is V3 language. There are some languages that are V1 like Scandinavian languages where verb is in the first position. So, if someone knows a language means the person should know about syntax or words, how words are arranged and how a statement is different from a question and how clauses or sentences are used to make larger ones like compound or complex sentences and how sentences make larger units like paragraphs and even text. And if I know language means I must know semantics. Semantics deals with meanings of words, meaning at denotative level as well as connotative level. Denotative, direct meaning, whereas connotative, contextual meaning. For example, red is a color denotatively, but red is a symbol for danger in context or connotatively. So, if I know a language means I must know the words and their meanings in denotative context as well as connotative context. And the other aspect is collocation. If I know a language means how words are associated with other words. We all know expressions like strong tea, and what is the opposite for that? Weak tea. We cannot say light tea, weak tea. And you can take a decision or make a decision. You can take a course or you can take an exam, but we say write an exam, which is wrong in terms of semantics. You can take an exam, you can write a letter, you can write a paragraph, but you can take an exam. If I know language means I must know its discourse patterns, which is pragmatics, formal and informal language, and we know high language and low language, and in Telugu we call it Grandhika Vyavaharika. And if I know a language means I must know the pragmatics, which means I should know about the language which has to be used in different contexts, in different situations. In this session, we have attempted to define language and we have attempted to show the difference between human language and the language of birds and animals, and we have identified language as a means of communication that has defined features, and linguistic competence is different from communicative competence or performance. And if knowing a language means knowing the language at all levels, knowing its pronunciation, knowing its syntax, knowing its morphology, knowing its semantics and knowing its pragmatics. So, when we come to the perspectives of language, a human language should have all these features. For good and effective communication, we should be competent as well as we should have performance. In this session, we attempted to define human language, and we have discussed how a human language is different from the language of animals or birds, and we have identified language as a means of communication, and we have looked into the various features or characteristics of language, and we have attempted to define the terms competence and performance, and we have even attempted to say knowing a language means knowing the language at all levels, knowing the language at phonetic level, at syntactic level, at morphological level, at semantic level, and at pragmatic level. For good and effective communication, we should be competent and we should have performance also. Just knowing the rules, just knowing about the language will not contribute to our communication. So, for effective communication, knowledge of language as well as the practicability of language are equally important. That's all for us today. Have a nice day.